Welcome to Sketched Sins, where every story has a dark side. They fed him cakes laced with enough cyanide to kill a roomful of grown men. He ate them, smiled, and asked for more. They shot him in the chest at point-blank range and watched him crumple to the floor. Minutes later, the story goes, he rose up, lunged for his killer's throat, and staggered out into the snow. So they shot him again. They beat him. They wrapped his body in heavy cloth and dropped it through a hole in the ice of a frozen river. That is the legend of how Grigori Rasputin died, the Siberian peasant who could not be killed. Almost none of it is true. And the man who first told that story was the same man who pulled the trigger. You're watching Sketched Sins. Tonight, how a wandering faith healer from the edge of Siberia became the most hated man in Russia. How 5 aristocrats lured him into a palace cellar to murder him, and how the story they told the world afterward, the story we all still repeat, was a lie built to hide what really happened in that room. He was born to a peasant family in Pokrovskoye, a hard little village in the Tobolsk region of western Siberia, in the winter of 1869. There were no schools worth the name, no money, no path out. As a young man, he had a reputation for drinking and for trouble. Then, sometime around 1897, something changed. He left his wife and children behind and walked, for weeks, then months, on a religious pilgrimage. He came back transformed, calling himself a strannik, a holy wanderer. He was never an ordained monk, despite the nickname history would hang on him, the Mad Monk. He held no rank in the Orthodox Church at all. What he had instead was a pair of pale, fixed eyes that people found impossible to look away from, and a way of speaking that made the desperate believe. By the early 1900s, Rasputin's reputation had traveled ahead of him to St. Petersburg, the glittering imperial capital. The Russian aristocracy of that era was bored, anxious, and obsessed with mysticism. Seances, healers, prophets. Into that world walked a bearded peasant in rough clothes who smelled of the road and claimed a direct line to God. He should have been laughed out of the city. Instead, he captivated it. Bishops received him. Society women wept in his presence. Word spread that this strange man from Siberia could heal the sick and see the future. In November of 1905, that word reached the highest house in the empire. Rasputin was introduced to Tsar Nicholas II, the absolute ruler of Russia, and to his wife, the Empress Alexandra Feodorovna. The timing mattered. The country had just been torn by revolution and massacre. The throne felt unstable, and inside the palace walls, the imperial couple was hiding a secret far more fragile than their crown. His name was Alexei, the heir, the only son, born after 4 daughters, the future of the entire Romanov dynasty. And he was dying by inches. Alexei had hemophilia, a disorder of the blood that kept it from clotting, inherited through his mother from the line of her grandmother, Queen Victoria of England. A simple bruise could swell into an internal flood. A nosebleed could last for days. A fall might kill him. The condition was hidden from the Russian public. A future Tsar could not be seen as weak. Alexandra, devout to the point of obsession, prayed for a miracle. And then a miracle seemed to arrive. In the spring of 1907, the boy suffered a dangerous internal hemorrhage, and Rasputin was summoned to pray over him. By the next morning, Alexei had improved. To Alexandra, the meaning was absolute. This man, and only this man, could keep her son alive. Years later, in 1912, Alexei nearly bled to death at a hunting lodge, and the court doctors had given up. A telegram from Rasputin told the family the boy would live. And he did. To a grieving mother, it was proof of holy power. The likelier truth is quieter. Rasputin often told the doctors to stop their treatments and leave the boy alone, which meant stopping the aspirin they were giving him, a drug that, unknown to them, thinned the blood and made the bleeding worse. And by calming a frantic mother, he may have calmed the child. lowering the stress that fed the attacks. Whatever the mechanism, the result was the same. Alexandra now believed her family's survival depended on a Siberian peasant. Through the sick child, Rasputin gained the ear of the Empress. Through the Empress, he gained influence over the Tsar himself. A peasant healer was now whispering in the most powerful household in Russia, and the court was scandalized. Stories spread of his drinking, of women, of a holy man who behaved like anything but. Aristocrats who had spent their lives climbing toward the throne watched an unwashed mystic walk past them all. They hated him, and they began to fear what his presence was doing to the monarchy itself. Then came the war. In 1914, Russia plunged into the First World War, and the slaughter on the Eastern Front was catastrophic. Millions of Russian men were killed, wounded, or captured. In 1915, Tsar Nicholas made a fateful choice. He left the capital to take personal command of his armies at the front, though he had little military skill. That decision left the Empress Alexandra effectively running the government at home and leaning at every turn on the counsel of Rasputin. Ministers, it was said, were appointed and dismissed on his word. A nation losing a war looked at its capital and saw a foreign-born empress and a peasant mystic steering the ship of state. The whispers turned to fury. By 1916, Rasputin had become the lightning rod for everything going wrong in Russia. People said he controlled the throne. They said that he and the German-born empress were secretly working for the enemy. Some said they were lovers. Almost none of it was proven. But in a starving, bleeding country, the rumor was enough. To a circle of aristocrats and royals, the conclusion was clear and cold. As long as Rasputin lived, he would drag the monarchy into the grave. To save the crown, the holy man had to die. They were not common assassins. At the center stood Prince Felix Yusupov, heir to the largest fortune in Russia, married to the Tsar's own niece, Irina. Beside him was Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a cousin of the Tsar, a man with royal blood in his veins. The third was Vladimir Purishkevich, a fiery right-wing member of the Russian parliament who had denounced Rasputin openly from the floor. With them were a doctor named Lazovert and an army officer named Sukhotin. And, by one disputed account, there was a sixth man in the shadows that night, a foreign officer with reasons of his own. On the night of December 16th into the 17th, 1916, the trap was set at the Moika Palace, Yusupov's grand home on a canal in the heart of St. Petersburg. Yusupov had befriended Rasputin in the preceding weeks. Now he offered the bait the mystic could not resist. A private late-night meeting with his wife, the beautiful Princess Irina. Irina was not even in the city. Rasputin came anyway. Yusupov led him down a stair into a basement room, fitted out to look like a cozy parlor, where wine and little cakes were waiting. This is where the legend is born. The cakes and the Madeira wine, the conspirators later claimed, had been laced with potassium cyanide, enough, the doctor assured them, to kill several men. Yusupov sat with Rasputin and watched him eat. According to Yusupov's own telling, the mystic devoured the poisoned cakes, drank the poisoned wine, and showed no effect whatsoever. Hours crawled by. Upstairs, the other conspirators waited in mounting panic. The poison was doing nothing. The unkillable monk sat in the cellar, calmly asking his host to sing him a song. So Yusupov went upstairs, took a revolver, came back down, and shot Rasputin in the chest. The mystic fell. The conspirators believed it was over. And then, in the version that made Rasputin immortal, he opened his eyes and struggled to his feet. He seized Yusupov and tore his way up the stairs and out into the snowy courtyard, roaring. Purishkevich chased him and fired again and again until he dropped. They beat the body. They bound it. They drove it to the Malaya Nevka River and pushed it through a hole in the ice. The story would harden into history. Poisoned, shot, beaten, drowned, and still fighting to the end. The body was pulled from the frozen river on the 1st of January, 1917. And the autopsy, performed by Professor Dmitry Kosorotov, tells a story very different from the legend. There were 3 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, one to the back, and a third, the fatal one, to the center of the forehead, a contact wound, fired with the muzzle pressed against the skin. There was no cyanide found in his stomach. There was no water in his lungs, which means the most famous detail of all is false. Grigori Rasputin did not drown. He was already dead when he went into the river. The man who supposedly survived poison and a hail of bullets had, in the end, died the way most men die when a gun is held to their forehead and fired, instantly. So where did the legend come from? Strip it down, and almost every superhuman detail traces back to a single source: the killers themselves, and above all, Felix Yusupov. The poison may never have been there at all. The doctor, Lazovert, later claimed he lost his nerve and replaced the cyanide with a harmless powder. Rasputin was known to dislike sweet things and may have barely touched the cakes, and the unforgettable image of the monster who would not die came mostly from Yusupov's own pen. In 1928, from comfortable exile, he published a best-selling memoir that turned the squalid basement killing into an epic. Casting himself as the brave young hero who battled a demon that refused to fall. The most famous murder in Russian history was, in no small part, a story being sold. But there is one detail the legend can't quite swallow, and one the truth can't quite explain: that contact wound in the forehead. In 2004, a British forensic review argued that the fatal shot was fired by a different kind of gun than the Russians carried that night, a British-made Webley service revolver. In the room, by some accounts, stood Oswald Rayner, a British intelligence officer and Yusupov's old friend from his student days at Oxford. Britain had a powerful motive. It feared Rasputin was pushing Russia toward a separate peace with Germany, a deal that would have pulled Russia out of the war and freed the entire German army to swing west and crush the British and French. Did a foreign agent fire the kill shot to keep Russia fighting? Britain's official intelligence historian, given access to the secret files, found no document that proves it. The theory is only a theory, but the wound in the forehead has never been fully explained. Rasputin had reportedly written a letter to the imperial family with a warning. If he were killed by the Tsar's own relatives, then none of the family would survive more than 2 years, and would all die. Whether those words were truly his or sharpened by legend afterward, what happened next is fact. The murder did nothing to save the monarchy. Just 10 weeks later, in the spring of 1917, revolution swept Nicholas II from the throne. Within 18 months, the Tsar, the Empress Alexandra, and the children, including Alexei, the bleeding boy Rasputin had kept alive, were shot to death in a cellar in the town of Yekaterinburg. The conspirators had killed Rasputin to save the crown. Instead, they had helped bury it. Now go back to the start of this video. Every sensational detail in that cold open. The cyanide he shrugged off. The bullets that couldn't stop him. The desperate drowning in the ice. Traces to one place. The men who killed him, telling the story afterward, with no one left alive to argue. Listen again for the word legend. Then think about the autopsy. 3 wounds, count them. The last one, to the forehead, fired with the barrel pressed against the skin. That is not how a terrified amateur shoots a man fleeing through the snow. That is how a professional ends it. They built a monster so that the truth would be easier to bury. A peasant healer, 3 bullets, and a death rewritten by the very hands that dealt it. The most unkillable man in history was killed in about as ordinary a way as there is, and then made immortal by the people with the most reasons to lie. Tell us in the comments, did you hear it before they did? I'm Bill. You've been watching Sketched Sins. You've been reading Sketched Sins. A new case opens every week, scrawled in ink, blood, and shadow. Subscribe so the next page doesn't turn without you, because every story has a dark side.